I have never actually reviewed Cyberpunk 2077. 3 years, 700 hours in the game, and at least I'd say triple that researching, testing, making content about it and engaging with the community, and not once have I actually committed a video to solely reviewing it in a concrete way, so it's long overdue. Sure, if you take the time to watch all my content or have been in my streams, you'll see that I've discussed it often enough and you'll know that I'm a fan, but having revisited my critical video the other day and with Phantom Liberty around the corner, I figured now was as good a time as any to clarify my opinion, adding it to the pile and, balancing the scales. Cyberpunk 2077 is one of the most ambitious games ever made, no doubt. Its scope and world building are incredible. A future classic, this game will be remembered thusly. Terrible takeoff, tainted, terrific title. Lousy launch led to lynching. I give up, I'm not a tabloid headline guy, but the game will be remembered as one of the greatest RPGs of all time, marred by an unfortunate launch, fueled by misdirected pre-launch hype and bad decisions, but in the end, the amazing experience for generations to come and the incredible sequels it will inevitably spawn will be all we really care about. And I'll outline why through the course of this video. There will be no fancy cuts in this, I'm just going to walk through the city and talk, so sit back and relax, let's dive in. And don't forget to jack that like button if you enjoy this. Redemption. I want to talk about the backlash and the road to redemption for a minute first, because I often get asked about it on my stream and it's the elephant in the room and I'm not blind to its occurrence. Let me start by saying I don't actually believe the CD Projekt Red redeemed themselves. In fact, I hate all those headlines. The mob just kind of calmed down and the crest of the wave flattened out, and along with a couple of nice patches and edge runners coming out, it brought a load of new people to the game, and things kind of flattened out. It's simple. Those that still truly hated the game will still truly hate it to this day, and they're entitled to and probably justified in their own way, and I see them in my comments still. The majority of the rest, well, they stopped chiseling their own noses and got on with enjoying it. Back in 2020 and 2021, trashing the game got clicks, it got views and it drove engagement, and the more it got engagement, the more it spread and the more it became the official narrative. You couldn't possibly like the game. If you liked it, you were either a shill or sucking down copium. Why do I say this? Well, because having played the game since day one, the core that makes it a fantastic experience, the stuff that matters personally to me and many others, has not changed, and they're the things that if you didn't like, you're still not going to like. So what we enjoyed was there to see and be enjoyed from launch. The game just got polished and tweaked a bit and now people love it. It would be easy for me to trash anyone who hated it at launch and loves it now and say they were simply being entitled or just couldn't look past a few bugs or overhyped expectations, but that wouldn't be entirely fair. The launch was a mess. So much so that, while par for the course with CD Projekt Red games, for those of you who can remember The Witcher's launch, the first game, not The Witcher 3, the 2008 Enhanced Edition is the version we all know and love, not the buggy 2007 launch. There was no backlash and outcry to the extent that there was now. It was what it was, but we admittedly live in a different world now with different expectations and different kind of media. And CD Projekt Red are not blameless, for they tossed the popcorn kernel in the frying pan that exploded into the fluffy white endosperm of hate. And I'll never defend oversharing of potential features and roadmaps with potential customers to build hype. Overpromising and under-delivering makes my head spin in any industry. Gamers aren't stupid by a long chalk, but at the same time, we should know better and temper our expectations. It's business. Overpromising and buggy launches are something rife in the industry, from Bethesda to BioWare. None of them are perfect, especially when delivering cross-platform. We should know better, basically. I'm not victim blaming here. The industry does need to calm down a little bit and realize we don't need to be sold the elixir of eternal life in order to back a game. Just a great game will do. So until this is accepted, we all need to wake up and remain healthily skeptical on the run-up to future launches. A game is just a game, and it's not going to be some all-encompassing, life-changing experience. It sure as heck can leave a mark though. As for bugs, I do believe you need to accept them, especially now with newer, more powerful consoles. As a multi-platform but primarily PC gamer, this has been the norm for decades, not because we accept substandard practices, but because, and I say this as someone who has developed professionally and worked as a tech support specialist in a number of companies, the hardware and software landscape is massively diverse. Show me two PC gamers rigs that are identical and I'll go quietly into the West. And with multiple tiers and specs of console and chronological model SKUs in a simple generation, multiple platforms and multiple generations to account for, bugs and performance become that bit more challenging when taking on a project with the scope of Night City. Look at Baldur's Gate 3. I mean, I've got bugs in that too, and I just don't care. This isn't the Goran Matrix. A bug isn't going to make me wake up in my goop pod and jack out because the immersion is broken. I mean, there's a destroyed chest floating in the grove on my playthrough right now as we speak, and it's not being held up by magic, but I don't care. It's still a fabulous game that I'm going to lose another big chunk of my life to, and believe it will also go down as one of the greatest RPGs of all time, at least in mine and a great number of people's estimations. But yes, Cyberpunk was Bethesda-level buggy. It made Andromeda look like a bug-free launch. And I was playing that the other day when Ryder's head snapped 180 degrees mid-conversation, so I say, so what? We knew it would get patched. Launch patience.exe and come back a bit later. These games are not life replacement sims that need to be absolutely perfect. The debacle with earlier consoles like PlayStation 4 is a big and very contentious issue, and not one I actually apportion much blame on CD Projekt Red for. Hold up, put your pitchforks and torches away. Give me a sec, I'll explain. CD Projekt Red had a tough choice to make, one that I believe has roots in The Witcher 3's launch. So let's roll back to 2015. The Witcher 3, a game millions of fans of the books and the first two games, the majority of which I'm guessing were probably PC gamers, have been waiting for with bated breath for the launch of, and there is instant disappointment. I bet many of you don't even remember, especially anyone surfing on the crest of hate for Cyberpunk, but the graphics appeared massively downgraded compared to what we had been shown in previous demos, teasers and E3 showcases. Yeah, sounds like a familiar MO, I bet, but then again, maybe it's news to many of you. According to the team behind the game, the eye candy, as quote unquote, in the earlier tech demos would have just been too difficult to scale up to the full game world, regardless of the platform. And even if this were the case, we shouldn't have been shown that. So we learned our lessons then, which is why many of us know to temper our expectations now, leopards and spots, all that. But yeah, how does that actually relate to the last gen console debacle of 2077, you may ask? Well, an insider claimed that they scaled things back because it couldn't actually realize its original vision with the relatively, limited power of the consoles that we had at the time. And, that brings us to the conundrum they faced with Cyberpunk 2077. The way I see it is, and this is speculation, call it an educated assessment. They had three choices. Do they repeat the Witcher 3 situation and downgrade the game so it functions on last gen, spurning PC gamers and next gen console owners and hamstringing the game's technical and visual potential, keeping last geners happy and, pissing everyone else off? Or two, do they simply not release it on last gen, after unfortunately promising they could, gaining the wrath of a very large player base there, who would be future upgraders as well and might not support them in the future once they actually jumped up a gen? Or, the option they did pick, do they try their best to make it run on the older gen consoles, trying to keep everyone happy and preparing to weather the inevitable storm, because you can be damn sure they had Xbones and PS4s to playtest on. They knew what was coming. I would be very surprised if they didn't. So they girded their loins and played the long game, weathering the storm, which has died down now, and a lot of people who wanted to upgrade have upgraded. It's really a tough lose-lose choice, and I don't envy anyone having to make it. And as far as I know, refunds were offered too, so, it was a bad situation, but they tried to make the best of it. And that being said, there was a lot of other shit going on. I guarantee you'll all fill me in down below, and that's fine. I'm just looking at this from the perspective of a jaded multi-platform gamer who has seen this whole circus time and time again and would prefer to just chill and keep my blood pressure manageable. So for future releases, let's remember that in the moment, it's easy to get caught up in the hype and disappointment. And it's so easy to listen to hate and give into it, letting it mar an otherwise enjoyable experience. We all know the feeling. You're enjoying something in ignorant bliss, only for someone to either innocently or with some kind of agenda point out its faults. Maybe they just don't want you to enjoy it because they can for whatever reason, or maybe they just weren't thinking, but you can't unsee the issues that you were previously ignorant of, and it does have an impact. Time, thankfully, smooths out these kind of bumps. Case in point, we all love the Witcher games regardless of launch issues. Cyberpunk 2077 will be the same before long. Why? Because none of this can take away from what made the game fantastic. So, without further ado, let's get on to that. I want to start with story. Right off the bat, this is one of the core fundamentals that make an RPG, action or adventure game a must-play for me. I'm not going to go into any spoilers or talk specifically about scenes or characters because I believe if you've not played it, going into it with an unfettered mind is key, so I'll keep it as spoiler-free as possible, but still, no matter what I say, it's like telling someone there's a twist in a movie. Even though you don't outline the twist, you're still kind of spoiling the fact that there is a twist. So that being said, if you do intend to play it, just keep that in mind. Now, the setting is that of a future version of the USA, or the NUSA, N-U-S-A, where you spend most of your time in a brightly lit neon city. You're going to experience a very poignant story in that city, one that is mature and both familiar and non-traditional at the same time. I could talk for hours on the different aspects and characters and outcomes and character arcs, but for now, I want to keep this as nondescript as possible. Like I said, especially for anyone thus far on the fence and unexposed to the game. The main story missions, if played back to back, might be considered short by some, and in fact it was one of the complaints at the time that you could complete the game in about 25 hours, but I'll call bullshit on that. Mass Effect 1, 2 and 3 all come in at 25 hours or less. That is just for the main storyline. And Andromeda, which was open world and pretty big, less than 20 hours. Quantifying a story's worth by its length is nonsense. You'll realise this more as you get older, and as that valuable life resource that you have at your hands dwindles with each passing day, you might not be so keen to pursue extremely long pursuits. Fantasy games do tend to be longer, the likes of Dragon Age and Witcher notably so, but does that mean Dragon Age is objectively better than Mass Effect because the main story is twice as long? No. Are the Snyder Cut or Pearl Harbor better than other movies by virtue of the fact that they took a lot more of your life to tell the story? No. And comparatively, getting 25 hours of entertainment for $60 is not a bad deal. A movie costs $20 and typically a tenth of that. So let's just kind of stop that. As it is, the main story is only like one branch in a tree of intertwining narratives in the game, from shards found on any of the 195 hidden gems to NCPD hustles, cyber psycho missions, gigs and other main jobs. Many characters and situations are connected. The main story is like the trunk of that tree. The world building is truly mind-bogglingly next level. God, it was hard to get that sentence out. I've talked about this in many of my videos. Even in my tips videos, I say about reading the shards and playing the smaller missions because not only do they give context, but they also alter outcomes and conversation choices in more major missions. Yes, you'll see this, but only when you play through a number of times and actually notice the changes. The replayability is insane from this perspective alone. Seeing the different ways you can advance specific interactions at different junctions of the game is fantastic. And the combat too, which we'll get to, also gives you so much replayability. So all that taken into account, you're actually going to be looking at anything from probably 50 to 100 hours of playtime to get all the story, which is as wide as it is long, and see what it actually has to offer. The writing is top-notch for gaming. The team did a great job. It's dark, mature, sexy, violent, and at times thought-provoking, upsetting, joyous, heartbreaking. Once you're paying attention to what's going on, it really makes you go through the gamut. Your singular mission and focus almost actively keeps you from seeing the wood for the trees too, and at times situations along with people reveal their layers bit by bit like onions getting peeled away as the time passes. Or maybe parfait. Everyone loves parfait. Anyway, it's great writing, intriguing and clever, and I absolutely loved it. The dialogue too is excellent, from simple NPCs chatting to each other on the street corner to key character dialogue and what you hear on the radios. Nothing was phoned in the scripting department. It's fantastic. Let's talk about this wonderful city that we're walking through. This is a wonderfully realized game world, and it's nailed the look nicely, with its different areas and districts capturing the different vibes from source material and genre in general, and echoing modern day too. It's vibrant and alive. I still shake my head when people say how dead the city looks. On the outskirts and industrial rundown areas, sure, a little bit, but get deeper into the city and there's no shortage of denizens to get in your way. It's got a great road network too, it's got some verticality, and it's definitely worth exploring, as you probably have seen from my other videos. Just walking or driving through is a real treat, especially now that driving has been tweaked a bit too. From the industrial districts to Corpo Plaza, from Kabuki to Jig Jig Street. It's an absolute feast for the eyes and ears. You know, let's talk about the graphics. This is about as good as you'll get from non-Unreal Engine stuff right now. It's fantastic. Sure, you'll see some texture popping in this video, but I'm running at 4K with ray tracing ultra turned on, and I expect there to be imperfections as I make this whole city load and unload as I walk through it. It's more of an issue of how I'm pushing my rig a bit too much. With ray tracing on or off, environments, characters, vehicles, and effects are all fantastic. Yeah, it's subjective, sure, and this is my opinion. But it is what it is. You can see it for your own eyes. There are other games that look amazing too. Sure, all games are starting to look amazing. Do you know, it's kind of accepted now. We're kind of at that plateau level where games are expected to look a certain way. I think this is still something else though. But the design, as I said before, of the actual physical city is great. The neon lighting and the varying weather, the way things look so different between night and day, it's at times eye-achingly gorgeous, even unmodded. I run a lot of mods, but the visual side of things here is all vanilla, except for those fancy sandals. Audio too, the sounds are great, from radio to weapons to all the sounds of the city. It's so immersive. All we're missing are the smells, but I'm not sure I want to smell inside the All Foods factory or Jackie's bedroom for that matter. Characters. Another important feature of a compelling and engrossing RPG are the people around you, and Cyberpunk 2077 doesn't fail in this department. The performances across the board are superb. And this is key. Voice acting is one of my major turn-offs or tune-ins in a game, and CD Projekt Red has never scrimped here. I really hope Bethesda can match this kind of level with Starfield, as the bar is well and truly raised now. Matched as well by Baldur's Gate 3. These are silver screen level performances, which, as someone who's been gaming since the 80s with its bleeps and bloops can attest to, is miraculous by comparison. It's so addictive to be around these virtual beings and find out about their stories. The characters overall are superbly realized, fleshed out, complex, lovable, hateable, and so very real in their own ways. The connections you form, from your best tune to your favorite Ripper and other close friends in between, is palpable, and this comes down to how well they've been written, both in backstory, character and script, and of course how they are performed. Even the relationships they have with each other are so well done. It's not always all about you, and some of the best moments in this can arise from you being an interloper or an outsider trying to find your place and how you've impacted people in these different dynamics. The mocap is great as well. Not much to say here, although I would like it if the main dudes didn't all walk with the same macho gait. You'll see. But but conversations are fantastic. The scenes are so immersive, and actually that takes me on to conversation staging, something that I think is overlooked in a lot of other RPGs where people just stand around and talk on the spot. Short of the times when you're confined to a seated position either in a cafe or in a car or in a bar or whatever the given scenario or set piece requires, and these are still very cinematic and well animated, the conversations are fluid and you're free to look around and even move around at your will. It makes you feel engaged, like you're actually there as part of the world, not a passive observer in face-locked dialogue tree visual novel type situations as per traditional RPGs. The fluidity was really well done, and being in a first person view also adds to this. From BioWare to Baldur's Gate and Fallout, they all kind of lock you into face-to-face fixed conversations. It's a mechanic I don't mind, but this was a cut above. It made conversations and situations much more dynamic, immersive and cinematic. You'll see, it's aces, and I'd like to see more of it. Let's talk a little bit about the missions. Another immersive element was the mission or quest design, both from a physical level perspective and an outcome perspective. They're fantastic, with multiple ways to achieve or fail at your goal through violence or diplomacy, and sometimes multiple unforeseen outcomes lying in wait down the road. And without going into too much detail about the mission, you'll come across one called the Pickup, which is a standout one of these for me. It's worth saving before going into the mission, just so you can experiment and see all the different ways things can pan out. But be warned, and no spoilers, but choices do actually matter, so it is worth thinking about the choices you make, and we'll get to that in a bit. Some missions are pretty dark, I have to say, and cover some very difficult and at times harrowing topics, just like mature film and TV does. So it's great in that way, but don't expect JRPG level of melodrama. This is proper stuff. There's no shortage of social commentary either, as is par for the course in the genre. The main jobs, both story and adjacent ones, are superb and not repetitive at all, and among the gigs alone, which are like a lower tier importance but still rich and often connected, the variety of not only ways to complete them but also mission type is excellent, from rescuing someone to doing hits or stealing or hacking tech. I didn't find it even came close to the kind of Ubisoft level of open world fatigue the game seemed to have these days. The lower tier NCPD hustles were somewhat filler, go here and kill these ruffians type of gigs, but even they had variety, some giving you hints to a stash or connecting you to wider plot lines or themes going on in the world, so all in great stuff. Now, choices. Like I said a minute ago, choices matter. Now, this is always to some extent an illusion, but let me go into it. They really did matter in this. It's as simple as that. There are some specific story beats and plot points that you have to hit, but it is a narrative game, not a life simulator. And for example, no spoilers, but you can lose an entire endgame option and storyline by making a specific choice at one point, or cut yourself off from characters by refusing to take on certain missions. And your in-mission choices do lead to very clear changes in the game, both from people and things that actually happen. And there are multiple endings you'll get to select, but that'll depend on your choices throughout the game and how you played. It's great. Sure, you can't choose to not do any missions and go and set up a street vendor stall and spend the rest of your days as a food merchant in the middle of Kabuki Market, but developers have to draw a line somewhere. When you actually get to the core of the trunk of the tree, choice is going to be an illusion at some point in order for you to get through the story and see how it plays out. So, choice is an illusion based on your perspective of how much you expect to control a narrative. And in a complex AAA title like this, there have to be limits or the game will never get finished. Okay, I want to talk about combat for a little bit. Surprisingly, this is one of my favorite parts of the game from a mechanics point of view. From the excellent melee combat to a vast range of ranged weapons and net running or hacking people. You can interact with the environment, switch it up, use a multitude of different options, modify yourself to an extent that you can move like the Flash and slice up everyone before they even get a shot off, force people to end themselves or make their implants overheat. It really is a tour de force of choice in combat, and it makes it so much fun, and also makes complete sense that this is why it was first person only. Third person would not have worked at all. It worked for The Witcher, as the combat in that is so very limited by comparison. The Witcher 3 is all about preparation at the end of the day. Cyberpunk is about being a badass merc who will stop at nothing, sniping from range or running into a fight, shutting down cameras, turning turrets on your enemies, taking someone's legs from under them with a shotgun in slow motion, and then dicing up his comrades with an electrified whip of cheese wire, or vicious mantis blades before turning on your camouflage and walking off into the crowds as the gangers wonder what the hell hit them. It's fantastic. And when you play it on very hard, the enemies can take you down in a couple of hits too, so it's a sufficient challenge even when you really hit your stride and find out the best way to make gangs fear you. It's really good. Another key element of RPGs for a lot of people is the skills tree, and there's a lot of opinions either way about the skills tree in this. I found it did actually make a difference when you were pumping the skills into where you need them. It did make you stronger, it did make you more powerful, and you could break the game in some delightful ways, making you very overpowered at times too. But the skill tree was there, it wasn't non-existent, and for a game that gave you quality first-person shooter level of combat and had a skills tree attached, that's pretty damn good. Now, the whole thing is getting reworked in Phantom Liberty, and I can't wait to see how it's been enhanced and improved. But again, that's just going to add to how good the game is. Were there things that could have been better? Sure. The NPC programming could have used a lot of work, and other things as well. It wasn't perfect, no. It's just a lot of the things that stood against it, like the AI I mentioned, or the bugs, vehicle handling, the lackluster race missions, or the lack of playable arcade machines, didn't actually detract from the things I mentioned above that make an RPG important. At least for me. And luckily for me, I didn't binge on pre-game hype, so I wasn't mourning the game that should have been either. I'm doing air quotes there. So, it did blow me away, not being hyperbolic there. I absolutely was flabbergasted. It really did blast my expectations. Lack of it being a Max Tech-centric story, notwithstanding of course, but have mods brought more life to the game? They sure have, but that enhances it. It doesn't diminish the vanilla even if they were missed opportunities, which I've highlighted before. There's some great clothes mods and other quality of life additions, like the survival one I'm running in the video. They don't improve or impact upon those important RPG factors I've already mentioned. Story, character choice, and convincing voice acting. No mods I've come across even touch these. Although that might be because the limitations of the modding kit, I don't actually know. So even as a console gamer, next gen, you're not missing out because the core of the game is an absolute banger. It's solid and massively replayable. An interesting question is if a game actually needs to be perfect. In my opinion, no. If you want to wait 20 years for the next game, maybe, sure, go ahead, if you got that long. Games are very much an art form as much as cinema is. And if I learned one thing in art college, it was that there comes a point when you have to walk away from a piece of art that you're working on. You as an artist have to be finished with it, even though it will never feel finished in your eyes. Perfection is not for art anyway, it's for photography, because otherwise all you're doing is being a very slow meat camera. So whilst having pop-in textures is not an artist's imperfection, I guess it's healthy to learn to accept some level of imperfection in games, especially with the scale and scope they have now. Focus on what is important and don't let yourself be so easily pulled from the experience.